The stupidity switch. They're turning off your critical thinking. Turn it back on. What if I told you that stupidity, the kind that really matters, the kind that shapes societies and topples nations, isn't simply the absence of intelligence? What if it's something far more insidious, a kind of mental switch that can be deliberately flipped off, even in the brightest minds, including perhaps yours or mine, without us even noticing? Have you ever felt baffled by the wave of misinformation, the growing polarization, or how obviously questionable ideas seem to gain traction? What's really happening to our ability to think critically? And more importantly, if that switch is being flipped off, how do we turn it back on before it's too late? Let's return to the central question. This switch that seems to shut down critical thinking. It's crucial to understand from the outset that we're not talking about an innate intellectual deficiency, a lack of mental processing power in the traditional sense of stupidity. What we're dealing with is a much more complex, and I dare say more dangerous, phenomenon, because it can affect anyone, regardless of IQ or education level. It's like a fog descending over reason. German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, writing from prison while awaiting execution by the Nazis, reflected deeply on the nature of the stupidity he saw sweeping across his nation. He described it not as an intellectual defect, but as a kind of functional or acquired stupidity. For Bonhoeffer, stupidity was less a psychological problem and more a moral and sociological one. He observed that this kind of stupidity was often cultivated and weaponized by power, a parasite that thrives on conformity and fear. Bonhoeffer came to a disturbing conclusion. Stupidity, in this sense, is a more dangerous enemy of good than evil itself. A malicious person can be exposed, their motives understood and resisted. The truly stupid individual, however, is often self-satisfied, irritable when confronted with facts that challenge their worldview, and dangerously prone to follow whatever current seems stronger or more convenient. He argued that it's nearly impossible to reason with the functionally stupid. They simply won't be persuaded. This is the painful paradox of intelligence we mentioned. Demonstrably intelligent people, capable of complex analysis in their fields, can fall prey to this kind of stupidity in other areas of life. That's because this functional stupidity is often not a failure of thinking, but a refusal, conscious or not, to use that thinking critically, especially when faced with group pressure or dominant narratives that offer comfort and belonging. Think of functional stupidity as a shield. In an increasingly complex and sometimes frightening world, simplifying reality, adopting ready-made narratives, and aligning unconditionally with a group can feel like a defense mechanism. It offers a sense of security, identity, of being on the right side. The fear of ostracism, of being the odd one out, can be a powerful motivator to shut off critical thinking and accept what's served without question. Figures of authority and power structures throughout history and even today have instinctively, or sometimes cynically, understood how this dynamic works. They don't necessarily need overt coercion to enforce conformity. All it takes is an atmosphere where questioning is subtly discouraged, where certain ideas are labeled unacceptable or dangerous, and where groupthink is rewarded with social approval and opportunities. What are the early signs that this switch might be getting flipped off in someone, or even in ourselves? It might start with the uncritical repetition of slogans and catchphrases, a growing resistance to consider opposing evidence, or a tendency to respond with personal attacks or heightened emotions when beliefs are respectfully challenged. It's a kind of mental shutdown, a refusal to engage with nuances. Maybe you've witnessed this around you, or even felt the temptation yourself. Have you seen a friend, family member, or colleague, someone you've always thought of as thoughtful and rational, begin parroting simplistic narratives, defending positions that seem to contradict their former values? This transformation can be subtle, almost imperceptible at first, which makes it all the more disconcerting and hard to confront directly. The nature of this process is inherently insidious because it's rarely a sudden conversion. It's more like a gradual erosion of intellectual independence. Small compromises here, quiet silences there, the fear of rocking the boat or being misunderstood. Each tiny surrender of critical thinking might seem insignificant on its own, but collectively, they pave the way for passive acceptance of ideas we might once have firmly rejected. It's vital, then, to recognize that this functional stupidity is not a fixed fate or a permanent personality trait. It is, to a large extent, a learned behavior or a conditioned response to specific circumstances. And if it can be learned or induced, it can also be unlearned and resisted. This understanding is the first crucial step toward reactivating our critical thinking and helping others do the same. Here lies the seed of hope we need to nurture. This functional stupidity that Bonhoeffer so clearly described from his tragic experience isn't just a philosophical abstraction or the product of specific totalitarian regimes. Social psychology over the past century has given us robust experimental evidence of how deeply susceptible we humans are to outside influence, so much so that we willingly shut off our own critical judgment and even our moral compass in favor of conformity or obedience. Let's consider Solomon Asch's famous conformity experiment. Participants were asked to judge the length of lines, a visually simple task. However, when surrounded by actors instructed to give unanimously incorrect answers, a significant portion of the real participants also gave the wrong answer, denying the clear evidence of their own eyes. They knew the correct answer, but the pressure to conform was so strong it led them to doubt themselves, or to simply follow the group to avoid the discomfort of standing out. Even more disturbing is Stanley Milgram's obedience to authority experiment. Ordinary people from various backgrounds were instructed by an authority figure, a lab-coated researcher, to administer increasingly severe electric shocks to another person, an actor only pretending to be in pain, for errors on a learning task. An alarmingly high percentage of participants continued delivering shocks to dangerous levels, simply because they were just following orders. The experiment revealed how easily personal responsibility can be surrendered under the influence of perceived authority. Then there's Leon Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance. It explains the mental discomfort we feel when holding two or more contradictory beliefs, or when our actions conflict with our beliefs. To reduce this dissonance, we often change our beliefs to justify our actions, or align with the group, rather than face the difficult task of admitting a mistake or changing behavior. This functional stupidity switch can thus act as a psychological coping mechanism, protecting us from the discomfort of critical self-reflection. These classic studies, though conducted decades ago, remain painfully relevant. Think about the speed and reach of misinformation in today's digital world. A study from MIT, for instance, found that false news on Twitter spreads significantly faster, deeper, and to a broader audience than true news. The novelty and emotional appeal of misinformation seem to make it more shareable, exploiting our psychological vulnerabilities, surprise, bias confirmation, and more. The very architecture of many social media platforms contributes to this phenomenon through so-called filter bubbles and echo chambers. Algorithms mostly feed us content that reinforces our existing worldview and connect us with like-minded people. While this can create a sense of community, it also isolates us from divergent perspectives, making critical thinking about our own beliefs an increasingly rare exercise. The switch is, in a way, kept in the off position by the very environment we inhabit. Consider the extreme polarization that defines so many public debates today. It's not just disagreement, which is healthy in any society, but a refusal or inability to even consider the validity of the other side's arguments, often accompanied by demonization of those with opposing views. Functional stupidity here manifests as tribal loyalty overriding the pursuit of truth, where group identity becomes more important than individual intellectual integrity. The constant information overload of the digital age also plays its part. We're bombarded with a relentless stream of data, opinions, news, and fake news, often from unverified or deliberately misleading sources. Faced with this deluge, the human brain, seeking efficiency, resorts to mental shortcuts, heuristics. It's cognitively easier and faster to accept simplified narratives or those coming from sources we already trust than to invest the time and mental effort required for deep, ongoing critical analysis. As if that weren't enough, we now face the growing challenge of artificial intelligence in creating and spreading sophisticated disinformation, like deepfakes, which are disturbingly realistic manipulated videos and audio. If discerning truth from fabrication was already difficult, the rise of such technologies threatens to make that distinction even harder, giving manipulators powerful tools to exploit and amplify functional stupidity on an unprecedented scale. Recognizing the existence of these psychological mechanisms and the systemic forces at play is not meant to lead us to despair or cynicism. On the contrary, awareness is the first step toward empowerment. Understanding how the stupidity switch works, what buttons activate it, whether group pressure, blind obedience, cognitive comfort, or algorithmic manipulation, is essential if we are to identify these influences in our own lives, and crucially, begin to take back control of our mental dashboard. We've now uncovered some of the psychological mechanisms and influence tactics that can activate this stupidity switch. We've seen how conformity, obedience, and cognitive dissonance make us vulnerable. But to fully grasp the scope of the challenge, we must look deeper at the systemic and cultural conditions that allow this functional stupidity to flourish so widely in contemporary society, affecting not just individuals, but the social fabric as a whole. It's worth questioning, for instance, the role of certain aspects of our educational systems. If the emphasis falls predominantly on memorizing facts and repeating information, rather than on robust critical thinking, independent analysis, and media literacy, are we unintentionally preparing young people more to follow than to lead with discernment? A system that prioritizes right answers over insightful questions may, unintentionally, be cultivating fertile ground for passive acceptance. We are also living through what many describe as a crisis of truth, marked by a sharp decline in trust in institutions that have traditionally served as beacons of information and knowledge, such as science, established media, and even government. When experts publicly disagree in extreme ways, and when deliberate disinformation manages to erode the credibility of these institutions, people understandably become confused, unsure of whom or what to trust. In this vacuum, simplistic and emotionally charged narratives find a receptive audience. Moreover, the culture of immediacy and instant gratification, so prevalent in the digital age, clashes directly with the demands of critical thinking. Careful reflection, fact-checking, and the consideration of multiple perspectives all require time, patience, and mental effort. These are qualities that seem to be in decline in a society increasingly accustomed to quick answers, easy solutions, and bite-sized communication, like what we find on many online platforms. We also cannot ignore the socioeconomic factors. Times of great economic uncertainty, rising inequality, and widespread social anxiety can make populations more vulnerable to demagogues and to narratives that offer easy scapegoats and grand, yet unrealistic, promises of restoration. When people feel powerless or betrayed by the system, rational analysis can be overshadowed by an urgent need for hope and a sense of control, even if illusory. At the core, our very nature as social beings, with an intrinsic need for belonging and acceptance, makes us perpetually vulnerable. As Ash's experiment demonstrated, the desire not to be the dissenting voice to be accepted by the group can be so overwhelming that we suppress our own judgment. This is a fundamental human vulnerability, exploited since time immemorial by those seeking to influence and control, and today amplified by the dynamics of online communities. The consequences of widespread functional stupidity are deep and troubling. A citizenry whose critical thinking has been collectively dimmed is more easily manipulated politically and less capable of making informed decisions about complex issues that affect everyone. From public health policies and pandemic responses to strategies for addressing climate change or managing the economy. The vitality of democracy itself depends on engaged, informed, above all, critical citizens. We're also witnessing a dangerous erosion of civic discourse. When critical thinking is replaced by dogmatic adherence to group ideologies, constructive dialogue becomes rare. Conversations turn into battlegrounds, where the goal is not to understand or find common ground, but to defeat the other side. This inability to engage in productive debate leads to deadlock in problem solving and to deepening resentment and social division. It's crucial to reiterate, once again, that this condition of functional stupidity is in no way a reflection of an individual's or a group's inherent intellectual capacity. People of all levels of formal education, in all professions, and with varying degrees of intelligence can be susceptible. It is fundamentally a matter of mental habits either nurtured or neglected, the informational and social environment we're immersed in, and ultimately the choices, conscious or unconscious, we make every day. Despite the daunting and at times bleak picture we've painted so far, it is absolutely vital not to succumb to pessimism or a sense of helplessness. If these patterns of thinking and behavior are learned, shaped by context and reinforced by certain dynamics, then they can also be actively challenged, unlearned, and reshaped. The urgent question that arises from all this analysis is, how, exactly, can we begin to turn the critical thinking switch back on, both at an individual and collective level? How do we rearm ourselves against the rising tide of irrationality? So we've explored the nature of this stupidity switch, how it can be subtly flipped off by external and internal forces, and the troubling consequences of that, not just for us individually, but for society as a whole. It's a scenario that may seem discouraging. I understand that completely. But as promised, this isn't a dead end. The beauty of the human mind lies in its capacity for self-awareness and change. The crucial question now is, how do we begin the journey to switch our critical thinking back on? How do we take back control of that dashboard? The first step, and perhaps the most challenging one. It's easy to point fingers at misinformation out there, or the irrationality of those people. But the truth, and it takes some courage to admit this, is that all of us, without exception, have our own switches, our own vulnerabilities. No one sees themselves as stupid or easily manipulated. If you asked 100 people whether they consider themselves above average critical thinkers, probably 99 would raise their hands. That's human. But that unchecked self-confidence might be exactly what blinds us to our own weak spots. Think about this for a moment, honestly. When was the last time you devoted real time and energy to deeply questioning a belief you hold dear? Not a passing doubt, but a serious investigation, actively seeking out the best and strongest arguments against your own position. For many of us, the answer might be a long time ago or even never. And there's no shame in that. It reflects how our brains are wired to seek consistency and avoid the discomfort of cognitive dissonance, which we've already discussed. Changing your mind is hard. Questioning what defines you is even harder, Ray. And how about this? Have you ever found yourself in a discussion, maybe online or with friends, defending an idea passionately, not so much because your arguments were unassailable, but because you felt loyalty to your group, your tribe? Whether it's political, social, or even related to a hobby, that us versus them feeling can be a powerful anesthetic for individual critical thinking. The desire to belong, to be validated by the community, can lead us to adopt and defend ideas that, under cooler and more solitary scrutiny, might not hold up. Also consider how you react internally when confronted with information that directly contradicts something you firmly believe. What's your first emotion? Is it genuine curiosity to understand a new perspective? Or is it discomfort, irritation, maybe even sudden anger? That emotional reaction can be a valuable indicator. If your first response is to shut the door, dismiss the source, or find reasons to ignore the information before even examining it, your critical thinking switch might be stuck in the off position at that moment. Normalizing this vulnerability is essential. It's not about feeling inadequate or flawed. It's about recognizing our shared humanity. We all have biases. We are all susceptible to social influence. Admitting this isn't a sign of weakness. It's the first and most crucial sign of intellectual strength and genuine commitment to growth. Intellectual humility, the ability to say, "I don't know," or "maybe I'm wrong," is not just a virtue. It's an essential tool for navigating the complexity of the world with clarity. So, the initial invitation I make to you right now is one of non-judgmental self-observation. Over the next 24 hours, try simply observing your thoughts and reactions. When you read a news story, hear an opinion, or join a conversation, what are your immediate impulses? Do you seek to confirm what you already believe? Or are you open to being surprised, to learning something new, even if it challenges your convictions? Don't try to change anything yet. Just observe, like a scientist watching a phenomenon. This awareness is the foundation upon which we'll build active strategies to reboot and strengthen our critical thinking. Remember, the goal here is not to reach some mythical state of perfect rational enlightenment, free from all errors in judgment. That's unrealistic. The goal is to become more aware, more intentional, and more skilled in using our capacity to think. It's a process, a continuous practice. And like any valuable skill, it requires dedication and effort. But the rewards, mental clarity, greater intellectual autonomy, better informed decisions, and a deeper ability to contribute meaningfully to the conversations that really matter, are immeasurable. Are you ready to take the next step on this journey of strengthening your thinking? Now that we've planted the seed of self-observation and acknowledged the importance of intellectual humility, let's dive into concrete strategies, practical tools you can begin using today to actively reactivate and strengthen your critical thinking. Think of it like going to the gym for your brain, exercises that with regular practice build stronger and more resilient mental muscles. The first major strategy is cultivate active, insatiable curiosity. The stupidity switch often flips when our curiosity falls asleep, when we stop asking questions and simply accept information as it's presented to us. The little child who asks, "Why?" over and over is actually exercising a pure form of critical thinking. As adults, we need to reclaim that primal curiosity, but channel it with more maturity and method. Start asking why more often, not just about the world around you, but about your own beliefs. Why do I believe this? Where did this idea come from? What are the strongest pieces of evidence supporting it? And what are the strongest arguments against it? This leads us directly to the need to actively seek out diverse perspectives. It's comfortable to stay in our echo chambers where everyone agrees with us. But growth only happens when we're challenged. Make a conscious effort to expose yourself to viewpoints that differ from your own. If you tend to consume news from a particular political slant, explore sources from the other side, not to convert, but to understand how they think and what their arguments are. Follow thinkers, writers, or content creators who challenge you, who make you question your premises. It might feel uncomfortable at first, like flexing a long, unused muscle, but it's incredibly rewarding. Here's our first practical activity, which I call the Opposing Perspective Challenge. It's simple, but powerful. Choose a strong belief you hold. It can be about politics, a social issue, an ethical stance, anything that matters to you. Now your challenge is to spend at least 30 minutes, ideally an hour, actively researching the best and most well-articulated arguments against that belief. Don't seek out strawman versions or caricatures of the opposing side. Look for the most intelligent, thoughtful defenders of that perspective. Read their articles, watch their videos, try to truly understand their logic. The goal isn't necessarily to change your mind, though that might happen, and that's okay, but to deepen your understanding of the issue's complexity, and perhaps even refine your own arguments or identify weaknesses in them. Are you up for the challenge? The second key strategy is strengthen your analytical thinking. This involves learning how to dissect arguments, spot logical fallacies, and assess the quality of evidence. There are dozens of logical fallacies, flaws in reasoning that can make arguments seem convincing when they're actually weak or misleading. For example, ad hominem, attacking the person instead of the argument; straw man, misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack; false dilemma, presenting only two options when more exist; or appeal to emotion, trying to win an argument by manipulating feelings rather than using logic. Start familiarizing yourself with the most common ones. You'll be surprised how often they appear in debates, advertising, and even your own thoughts. Along with spotting fallacies comes the crucial skill of evaluating the credibility of information sources. In the internet age, where anyone can publish anything, this is more vital than ever. Before accepting something as true, especially if it's surprising or aligns perfectly with your biases, pause. Ask yourself, what's the source? Is it known for accuracy and fairness? Does the author have expertise in the topic? Does the site look professional, or is it riddled with errors and amateur design? Do they cite their own sources? A simple but powerful tip: for important news, always try to verify it with multiple reliable, independent sources before internalizing or sharing it. Another key piece of analytical thinking is the ability to distinguish correlation from causation. Just because two things occur together, or one follows the other, doesn't mean one caused the other. Many conspiracy theories and much misinformation hinge on this confusion. For example, ice cream sales and drowning incidents may both rise in the summer. They're correlated, but that doesn't mean buying ice cream causes drownings. The underlying cause for both is warm weather. More people swim and eat ice cream. Always ask, is there another possible explanation? Is there direct evidence of a causal link? Or could this be coincidence or some hidden factor at play? Finally, for today, let's introduce the third major area: managing your emotions and cognitive biases. We've touched on this, but it deserves deeper focus. Our emotions are powerful and can easily hijack our rational thinking. When we feel threatened, angry, or overly enthusiastic about an idea, our prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for critical thinking and logical decision-making, can be temporarily shut down by the limbic system, our emotional brain. Recognizing when you're having a strong emotional reaction to information is the first step. Before reacting or forming a judgment while highly emotional, practice the reflective pause. Take a breath, step back if needed, and give your rational mind a chance to take over. Ask yourself, is my emotion coloring my judgment right now? And of course, there's the well-known confirmation bias, our natural tendency to seek, interpret, favor, and recall information that confirms or supports our existing beliefs or values. We all do it. The issue isn't having the bias, it's being unaware of it and doing nothing to counteract it. One way to actively combat confirmation bias is to make a conscious effort to seek out evidence that challenges your beliefs. as suggested in the opposing perspective challenge. Also ask yourself, if I believe the opposite, how would I interpret this same information? Continuing our exploration on managing emotions and biases, beyond the reflective pause and the active search for information that challenges our confirmation bias, I want to propose a second practical activity, the bias journal. It may sound simple, but it can be eye-opening. For 1 week, take a few minutes at the end of each day to briefly jot down situations where you noticed a bias, either in yourself or in others, affecting a judgment or decision. It could be confirmation bias, anchoring bias, placing too much trust in the first piece of information received, availability bias, overestimating the importance of easily recalled info, or any other. The goal isn't self-criticism, it's training your ability to recognize these patterns in real time. By naming them, you begin to take away their automatic influence over you. This brings us to a crucial point: the courage to be wrong and the strength to change your mind. In our culture, being wrong is often associated with failure or ignorance. Changing your opinion can be seen as weakness or inconsistency, but I want to challenge that view. In the context of critical thinking, acknowledging a mistake or shifting your view in light of new evidence or a stronger argument is not a sign of weakness. It's one of the greatest signs of intellectual strength, integrity, and a genuine commitment to truth over ego. Think of scientists. The scientific method is built on the idea of testing hypotheses and being willing to abandon them if the data doesn't support them. We need more of that mindset in our everyday lives. Destigmatizing error is essential. We will all make mistakes in our judgments and beliefs at some point. That's inevitable. What matters is what we do next. Do we treat the mistake as a learning opportunity, or do we dig in deeper to protect our pride? Choosing the first path is liberating. It gives you permission to explore our ideas without the paralyzing fear of being wrong, because you know you have the capacity to revise yourself. That, my friend, is a superpower. Let's widen our lens. Strengthening critical thinking isn't just a solo effort. It thrives in community. Which brings us to collective action and building community resilience. How can we foster an environment where critical thinking is valued and practiced? It starts with how we engage with others, especially in disagreement. We need to relearn the art of respectful disagreement. In a debate or discussion, the goal shouldn't be to win, but to explore the issue together, even if no consensus is reached. That means focusing on arguments, not attacking the person, avoiding the ad hominem we discussed. It means actively listening to what the other person is saying, genuinely trying to understand their perspective, especially when you strongly disagree. A powerful tool here is active listening. This goes beyond just staying quiet while the other speaks. It involves paraphrasing what you heard to ensure understanding. So, if I understood correctly, you're saying, asking clarifying questions and acknowledging valid points from the other side, even if you disagree with the overall stance. This not only improves the quality of the conversation, but also reduces defensiveness and opens space for more productive exchange. How about a third long-term practical activity? Let's call it the challenging conversation. Identify a topic on which you and someone close to you, a friend, family member, disagree. Propose a conversation with the explicit goal of understanding each other's perspectives, not convincing one another. Set some ground rules. No interruptions, no personal attacks. Focus on listening. You might be surprised at what you both discover. And what about challenging misinformation in our social circles? This can be delicate. No one likes to be corrected publicly or feel foolish. A more empathetic approach is usually more effective. Instead of attacking, you might share a reliable source that presents a different view, or ask questions that gently encourage the person to reflect on the information they shared. Where did you see that? Is that source usually reliable? The goal is to plant a seed of doubt and encourage critical thinking, not to shame or alienate. Finally, we arrive at the ongoing path, a lifelong commitment. Flipping the critical thinking switch and keeping it active isn't a one-time action. It's a dynamic process, a daily practice, a continuous commitment to self-awareness, learning, and intellectual humility. Some days will be sharper, more analytical. Other days will slip into old habits. And that's okay. The key is persistence, patience with yourself and with others. Remember the thread of hope that has run through this conversation. Our capacity for critical thinking, questioning, analysis, and sound judgment is one of the most powerful tools we possess as human beings. It enables us to solve complex problems, innovate, grow, and build fairer, more rational societies. Don't let anyone, whether external forces or your own fears and biases, diminish that capacity. It's yours. Cultivate it. Protect it. So here's the final challenge I leave you with today. What small step, what concrete action will you commit to this week to strengthen your own critical thinking or to help create a more thoughtful and reflective environment around you? It could be one of the activities we've discussed. It could be starting a difficult conversation. It could be dedicating more time to reading diverse sources. Whatever it is, pick something and start. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which of these strategies resonated most with you? What challenges do you anticipate in trying to apply them? Share your ideas and experiences in the comments below. Everyone's journey is unique, but we can learn a great deal from each other. We've reached a moment of reflection. Our journey has shown that the real stupidity switch isn't about a lack of intellectual ability, but about something far subtler and more dangerous, the shutting down of our critical thinking. We've seen how this functional stupidity, a concept deeply articulated by theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer in his reflections, especially in letters and papers from prison, can be activated by social pressure to conform, a dynamic clearly demonstrated in Solomon Asch's classic experiments. We also examined the unsettling ease with which obedience to authority can lead us to surrender moral judgment, a lesson from Stanley Milgram's powerful studies. Detailed in Obedience to Authority, an experimental view, we understood how the need to ease mental discomfort, cognitive dissonance as theorized by Leon Festinger in A Theory of Cognitive Dissonance, can drive us to distort our perceptions to maintain internal consistency, often at truth's expense. And we saw how, in today's world, misinformation finds fertile ground to spread, illuminated by the revealing MIT study on the rapid spread of false news on social media. These dynamics, fueled by cognitive biases, information overload, and at times, deliberate manipulation, can make any of us vulnerable, no matter how intelligent we believe ourselves to be. This is the core idea we presented from the beginning and which bears repeating. The greatest danger lies not in a lack of intelligence, but in the failure to consistently apply critical thinking, a condition that can affect any of us. Yet recognizing these vulnerabilities isn't a call to despair, it's a call to conscious action. Together we've explored practical strategies to reactivate that switch, cultivating active curiosity, rigorously analyzing information, managing emotions and biases, and embracing the courage to re-examine our beliefs. The path to clearer, more independent thinking is open. It demands a sustained commitment to self-awareness, learning, and intentional practice. The ability to choose to think critically remains one of our most powerful tools for personal autonomy and for building a more lucid society.